Question here from Dickie Knuts. I assume the K is silent. Sorry if I'm upsetting your ancestors. 2933. This was great. I forgot this chapter in the Cenk story. Why do you call his allies the ethical dark web? I'm familiar with it and like the nickname intellectually dark web for Weinstein Harris, a parody coined by Seder. Yeah, I mean, I've watched Sam Seder a ton. In a previous podcast, I talked about paying attention to them starting in the mid 2000s, probably. And so, yeah, I'm very familiar with the intellectual dark web, and that's what that is. That's referring to the intellectual dark web. So the sort of foundational context of this whole New York Times smear is that we're sort of we're trying to walk through the campaign in a way that is kind of an unofficial biography or documentary of Cenk's campaign in a sense, because it gets into the Bernie Sanders stuff and the ways. But I'm framing it around Cenk feeling intimidated and Anna feeling intimidated, because we're getting back to the point where Anna is expressing. And this is stuff that you're going to see in the next half hour. So here's a little bit of a spoiler stuff. In the next half hour, we return to the whole intimidation topic, because Anna was very upset at Chrissy Smith for trying to intimidate people. And I didn't want to just run with the idea that she was only referring to the ploy to intimidate the workers, which is what TYT expresses in their tweet. So TYT refers to it right here. This is their tweet, still up on Twitter, as a ploy to intimidate us and the people who work at TYT. So when I was editing this, I was like, okay, so I think it's pretty. I remember this is the part of the video where Anna is angry that Cenk said to endorse Christy Smith.
Now, whenever you do this, you get criticism from both sides, including Casper, apparently.
Oh my God.
His reasoning is she'd be better than the Republican alternative, which is true.
In any previous year, I might have agreed with you, but
she knows too much.
Knowing what I know about Christy Smith, knowing about the dirty games that she played, knowing about the acts of intimidation she engaged in to try to get you to drop out of that race.
Anna remains unpersuaded.
I don't think that's a hard question at all.
Okay.
Okay.
It's lead pipe and blowtorch time.
She will serve as one of Nancy Pelosi's puppets. If she better be careful though. Any missteps, Christy, you better be a good girl. Nancy Pelosi will definitely stab you in the back, so you better be a good girl and a nice little puppet for the establishment, okay? No, I'm not telling anyone to vote for anyone in that race. Disgusting.
Okay.
Moving on.
All right, now let's move on, apparently.
She's a terrible person. It's not just about what she represents as a politician. Knowing what I know about her firsthand and the disgusting political games that she engaged in to try to destroy you and to try to intimidate people here at this place of work.
Yeah.
Intimidate people here at this place of work. That's almost the same as the official company line, so it's safe to assume she's referring.
And I was like, all right, well, I'm pretty sure she means this when she's taking umbrage about all that stuff. But I'm like, I don't know that for sure. I'm going to see, were there any other instances of intimidation that they could plausibly, because if I put this out and I don't include those other instances, they can come at me and say, well, Hank didn't do very much research. He clearly is only hyper-focused on the workers thing, even though I think it's pretty obvious that, they literally tweeted that they thought this was a ploy to intimidate, which is as somebody foundational to why we started the union. And this is like, oh, I know the fucking truth. That's not true. This is not true at all. But okay, this is their narrative. And I wanted to find other times where they used the word intimidate or other instances that led them down to intimidation. So this is where we end up in the video going from Anna taking a umbrage about that, which is rightful. I actually think that if she believed that that's what happened, if she trusted Cenk that was the narrative, she's right to feel annoyed at them for that, even though it's illogical and makes no sense and should have been confirmed. But I give her credit for, you want the people that are ride or die, right? We've all seen Fast and the Furious, every single episode, whatever they call them, sequels. So. But I to be fair, I was like, well, let me just see if I can find other instances that I'm not talking about being intimidated, because I knew that this whole thing was very intense for them, and I was already sort of developing this notion that they're that I was going to give them grace, or at least the benefit of the doubt that they were plausibly justified in being suspicious about where the union came from, even though, again, it breaks down a lot from logic very easily and is easily confirmable. But because of the campaign, all the rules were a little bit weird. Everything was askew because Cenk was running for Congress. And as you know, we started organizing way before he started running for fucking Congress. The union had nothing to do with his goddamn congressional campaign, other than that it became the environment in which all this shit went down, right? But nothing to do with its origins at all. So that's where I went back and I searched I found Cenk's story about his, because he uses the word intimidate. I found that story about how he's concerned that they're being intimidated by people filming, and I take him at good faith that that's an accurate story. I did find him telling someone else, I think it was David Packman, where he says the story and it's almost word for word identical. I considered making like a side by side. It's really weird. It was like, but as a person who's done stand up comedy, when you kind of get a bit down, even if it's true, you sort of memorize the beats and you say the same words over and over again. So I almost give him some space on that, but he does say it almost word for word. Not exactly. Maybe it was to Kyle. I don't remember. But anyway, so I included that, and I was like, okay, well, we're going back into the video now. We're seeing that Cenk was intimidated. Okay, so this part.
At this place of work, that's almost the same as the.
All right, I'm going to jump ahead 5 seconds, and then we fly back. Oh,
Told their audience came from Nancy Pelosi, but there were other instances that may be fueling her umbrage. In late January, Cenk recounted that
damn it. Press the K button. That's the shuttle. It's like start stop as opposed to the space bar. Okay, good. Little YouTube advice. So yeah, here's Cenk's intimidation story. January 28th is when it was on TYT. Take him as good faith that that's his thing. And then let's jump a little bit here. So he tells that whole story. We do that thing. I want to put a shadow below it so it centers it a little bit differently. And then here's Anna's intimidation story.
It's a curious coincidence.
Curious indeed. In mid-December, Anna had her own encounter.
So let's go ahead and try to intimidate Anna.
Mm-hmm.
I'm building the whole case for them that they had decent reasons. I didn't just want to present my own interpretation without at least doing due diligence to find potentially their context for why they were paranoid about the union's origins or why she was mad about intimidation. I think that's fair. This is also why this fucking thing took so long.
Into accusing by accusing her of trying to dox people.
So for context, bad faith smears
and then
had been launched at her.
So for context is like the start of, what is it, 10 or 15 something minutes about the campaign, or roughly. And so this is where we rewind back to the November. Again, this is how you can tell I didn't plan this goddamn thing. It starts out going through the timeline and then it zooms back and forth on the timeline. Like I think it'd be more boring, honestly, but like a version of this story could have been told. Here's what happened in November. Here's what happened in December. Here's what happened in January. Such and such. But this kind of gives us a notion of when they started, Cenk knew he was going to be beat up. And this is sort of the beginning of the part about his campaign, I guess, in a sense.
Her famous CEO friend during his political campaign, surprising no one.
They're going to fight you.
Oh, okay.
Cenk least of all.
Come and see. Get some. Okay, I'm not in danger. I am the danger.
They're gonna hate him, haha.
They're gonna hate me.
I like that part. And then this leads us forward to explaining why Anna's false dox accusation was intimidating for her. And you can't really tell that without explaining the Bernie Sanders endorsement. And so now this video is becoming like, okay, so this is not just about the union busting tactic itself. It's also about the context that led to the union busting in defense of them. And partly why we focus on the New York Times. And so I'm going to jump ahead a bunch here, skip the Bernie Sanders part. I do want to watch. I want John Cusack to see this too. Somebody tweeted John Cusack that he's in this video. I think it's funny. Just I'd be curious what he thinks. Yeah, I love the Mike Tyson chunk.
appear as though Cenk is supportive of all sorts of disgusting
Skipping
and
ahead.
Caliber ammo would stay on the shelf if available, and there was a lot available. Smith herself dove into the melee, pummeling Cenk, declaring him further disqualified, invoking faith, wresting the term progressive from his clutch, then finishing with a killer 4 combo.
Like, it's not fair.
With a
Sorry, that she calls him genocide denier. He's not a genocide denier anymore. He was, but he has corrected that. But he still gets smeared with that label. But I'm not doing like I'm showing the way people characterize the guy. So that's why I'm including what she said in that. But like, yeah. Oop. Sorry.
Old clips plus establishment malice backed the TYT brain trust into a corner.
we're now put in this position where we literally have no choice but to respond to the smears that are being put out there by the establishment, plain and simple.
We've returned to intimidation.
Okay.
Anna's tweet inquiring as to the identity of the person posting the clips.
So this is how this thing became a big video. I could have stuck to, look at the lie, look at the bullshit. Here's the things that they said. Here's the things that weren't true. I was there. I know the fucking truth. Here's my tweets. And that would have been my 8-minute video. I probably still should do one. That's more or less what I'm prepping for later on this week or next week. But I gotta get focused on this goddamn project anyway. I've not been working on the documentary at all. So the 3 yellow dots are like an attempt to sort of tie these kind of things together, and you'll see more of that in an upcoming thing.
Provoke bad faith accusations of attempted doxing.
Because it would look real bad if we find out that this person is actually associated with a campaign or is part of the DNC.
Or an industry or a lobby group or something.
Exactly. That would be a real problem. So let's go ahead and try to intimidate Anna.
So there's the blinky yellow. Even made the background blink. Very proud of that. That was through After Effects.
That would be a real problem. So let's go ahead and try to intimidate Anna into accusing it by.
I wasn't saying about Anna. I was saying about that trying to coordinate that background blinking.
By accusing her of trying to.
So here we get into the New York Times stuff.
Simply identifying a name that goes along with a social media account, that is not doxing a person.
Yeah.
The siege was underway.
That's from the John Cusack movie One Crazy Summer, which I just love. It is one of my favorite movies, at least as a teen. I always hope to have at least several crazy summers.
But this is how far Christy Smith, the establishment media, and the.
Okay, so the Chiron here on this video is Anna responds to media coverage of Cenk's race. So now we're getting into the New York Times smear. And it was a genuine smear. I think I've misunderstood, or maybe people are interpreting the tone of the ethical dark web as being me trying to discredit the defense of Cenk here. Probably because, well, one is I don't always pick up on all that stuff, trying to avoid saying it's because I'm autistic. I don't like just playing that, even though it's literally entirely every single moment of my life and always will be. This is how energy flows through my nervous system. So it's always that. But like, it's plausible that I misunderstood the tone I'm going at. But I think possibly the reason it might not be so obvious to everybody that I'm actually trying to defend them in this case is because I'm kind of sarcastic in tone a little bit. And I suppose it'd be fair to presume that everything in this video is antagonistic, so that I'm just only trying to debunk or something like that. Which I get that. And I think though, that when it's a more whole, that it'll make a lot more sense. It'll fold, because let's get into a little bit further.
The Democratic establishment will go to smear Cenk.
Most notably, the New York Times did their part by twisting Cenk's interview with David Duke.
Like a lot of that blinky, flashy shit, it's just like, I use the invert effect a lot in Premiere. It has a lot of drop down power. You can do a lot of different colors and stuff. But anyway, like I had sort of imagined a whole more eloquent introduction to the ethical dark web with like spider webs and stuff. And I did use an AI thing to make the spider webs starry AI, which feels like using a Commodore 64 in terms of the power. There's a couple of little AI graphics or like backgrounds that I created, but then I heavily modified them myself in Photoshop and stuff. So I almost feel like that's an ethical compromise to use any kind of AI stuff at all, but I don't know. That's a whole different discussion.
Duke, which roiled up the ethical dark web.
This is the one that's really the most offensive.
Yeah, so people are wondering why I call it ethical dark web. It's because the okay, so it's Bari Weiss wrote this for New York Times. It's a picture of Eric Weinstein. That guy's just a but Bari Weiss coined this phrase intellectual dark web, and the headline here is "Meet the Renegades of the Intellectual Dark Web." And this has been pilloried a lot by the Majority Report and other, Michael Brooks back then, and other people, show I found making fun of it fine, funny. It was just one of those phrases that lefty shows picked up on a lot. Seen on Twitter a whole bunch. I didn't realize how much of this would be available here, but it's this meeting. I guess there's a photo. Isn't there a different photo of Rogan? I remember this one photo. So Christina Hoff Sommers, whoever the fuck that is, it's a meeting with Sam Harris, Eric Weinstein, or Stein, managing director of Thiel Capital. Dave Rubin, and their spouses. What the fuck was Rogan? And then there's this one photo of them all. There it is. Joe Rogan, who I met, nice guy. I met him at TYT when he came in for an interview. Yeah, so it's just this kind of piece about this online, whatever. Bari Weiss has her own reasons for doing stuff. So that's all it was, is just referring to that, because we're talking about ethical issues. Journalistic ethics is kind of the context for where we are in the story. And then I don't know if I would have called it the ethical dark web if Rogan wasn't in this. Because I find Rogan in it very fun for me. When I saw that clip of him talking about the
smear, didn't you see what they did to Cenk Uygur?
Like, it's just so funny that he brought it up and that he was taking umbrage at a mainstream media outlet outright lying, right? So I'm not trying to discredit the smear at all with this whatsoever. So I mean, it's really not much more to it than it's a play on intellectual dark web, and because Joe Rogan is kind of the connective tissue between them both. But maybe I misunderstood the tone of it in that sense. But I do think that after you see the next chunk, partly what this video is about a media company that said something false to its audience, right? Young Turks smeared their own workers, and nobody called them out on it except me, right? That's kind of what this whole thing is. It's called Tell the Truth, Cenk. So in smearing their workers, the workers deserve to have somebody call out TYT for that. But in this case, Cenk's interview with David Duke was completely mischaracterized by the New York Times to make it seem like he agreed with David Duke, claiming to not be racist. In other words, endorsing or, putting the TYT stamp on David Duke. It's racist. Like, they made Cenk seem like he was in agreement with David Duke. And it was very, very clear from the video that he wasn't. Now, I think one criticism you could maybe say is like, well, why don't you show the video of Cenk refuting David Duke? And I have thought about that. But the answer to that question is, I'm not doing this to like show Cenk's challenge. I'm showing the media coverage of that. And actually, what's kind of interesting about this, and that's a narrative decision, and maybe I'll eventually change that. Maybe there's a reason I need to show the David Duke video, but we're not trying to. This whole thing is not about like, because I don't need to. It's to me, it's so upfront that Cenk clearly wouldn't be a guy who would agree with David Duke on its face, I guess. But it's also not the point of it, though. I'm trying to talk about the way media, not exactly, but in the same way that me and my friends who started this union, we were smeared, and once that horse gets out of the barn, the way we were thought of or talked about, and again, we're nobodies, we're just red shirts to this whole universe, so it doesn't arise to that level of like massive, people aren't going to care as much about lowly workers, right? But nevertheless, our integrity was impugned by Cenk because he was trying to prevent inquiry into his shitty workplace or shitty employment practices, which are the reasons why we started the union to start with, is that we didn't have any control over what people thought of us. We had no ability to really correct the record on our own, other than me with my little shitty tweets and stupid podcast trying, which didn't amount to much. And so these guys all came to Cenk's defense very validly. I think they're right to. including Joe Rogan. Like Joe Rogan's really annoyed by this whole thing because it's so. And the funny thing is here, actually, if you do watch the video with Cenk and David Duke, the way Rogan tells the story, I don't have it all. It's all edited here.
From the Young Turks.
That's the Humanist report.
This is so above and beyond wrong.
And then it just happens that Kyle Kulinski's camera, and I think it was like this for a long time, was this really, it needed color correction desperately. I think he was probably color correcting for the brightness of the sign up here, like maybe white balancing to this bright neon sign behind him, but it made his presentation look very dark. I guarantee his skin tone settings are super low in the color charts.
He was interviewing David Duke, and he goes, "Of course you're not a racist." He's mocking.
Like that's not at all accurate. Rogan is not. He is very accurately grasping the tone and the feeling of what happened. So he's not wrong, but if you read it, it's not what happened. Cenk was kind of quietly said like, "Of course not," or "Of course." David Duke is like, "I'm not. Come on, no, you can't say I'm a racist." And Cenk is like, "No, of course not." So like Rogan's not accurate, but he's not wrong at all. In fact, he's giving a very accurate rendition of the manipulation by the New York Times in that one. I find that kind of fascinating.
That it appears malicious.
And they took it out of context, in quotes.
And it appears like they don't care that they're getting something incredibly...
And they wrote that he said to David Duke, "Of course you're not a racist."
Mind-numbingly...
They try to pretend.
That voice that he's talking to, his Brian Redband guy, was on Rogan for a long time. So I think they're still buds.
Stupefyingly wrong.
It's a clip on Twitter. Mr. Duke.
So I'm using this kind of montage style to kind of recount what happened and tell the story, and you get to see these different characters sort of presenting it in their own way. That's kind of because showing Cenk in the video, again, not the point of this whole project at all, but would kind of spoil the feeling of like, here's what the media said about it. This is what's going on. So, but if you say, well, yeah, but you're leaving out this relevant stuff as far out of here, I think that's fair. If that's your criticism, yeah, that's fair. But so as we get deeper into this, and then honestly, there was more questions. I don't really have anything super detailed, but let's just watch it.
Ends an interview by saying, quote, "I am not what you call a racist," end quote. To which Mr. Uygur replies, "No.
Of course not."
Like I intentionally wanted to cut from Sam Seder to David Doel there in the middle of a quote, because that's giving you like, I don't know. I'm not sure why. That's a deliberate choice. I'm not sure. I hope it's not confusing, but like I'm intentionally sort of making it about the way these guys are talking about it. So I don't want the viewer to totally, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know. I had some kind of reasoning.
All right.
Has Jennifer and Medina ever even heard of sarcasm?
They will
That's so
link
funny.
to the argue that bestiality should be legal, but somehow they couldn't find
And like for the same reason, I'm not showing any of the bestiality stuff, because it's funnier and more compelling in my opinion if without that in full information, because you're going to hear this and go, they keep talking about bestiality. What are they even getting at? And that sets up the kind of final punchline of this whole montage that we'll see in a
David
second.
Duke interview.
Absolutely no sense.
And I'm going to show you proof that they are lying here.
This is an actual smear. This is a lie.
All of this here is painted in a way to make Cenk sound terrible.
Kyle Kulinski, okay?
So now this is the basic color correction. Click. I need to put a little click noise on that one. So we get to see Kyle's face finally lit up the way it should have been with color correction. So what if the neon lights behind you are a little bit bright, or we could even mask that down if
Kyle
you wanted
Kulinski.
We didn't link to it.
I don't know why I like that.
We, as the New York Times,
Kyle links to this video where it shows, Cenk like just shutting down David Duke completely.
It was incredibly combative.
He was basically clowning on David Duke.
he's now like literally mocking him.
So obviously he was being sarcastic.
Cenk kicked David Duke's ass.
He was rude to David Duke.
Over 900,000 views.
Cenk Uygur just utterly destroyed David Duke.
Like all that chunk to me tells that I don't know how people can interpret that as me trying to suggest that I don't agree with anything they're just saying there. And again, like people are going to interpret stuff differently, especially when you're going for a kind of certain feeling or style.
it's unbelievable.
That's crazy. That's a crazy lie, though, for that to get into the New York Times.
Even though we linked to the clip about bestiality.
Somebody just got too woke for their own good. Somebody got over woke. They lied.
It's unbelievable.
They crossed the line. They wanted to stop him. They wanted to stop him.
Again, it's a hit job.
It's just a complete lie.
Shameful.
You have to retract, and you have to
So
apologize.
the call to retract and apologize is important. Kyle kind of led the charge because his tweet with the video that corrected everything, or yeah, that's right, the one that Sahil was referring to. So I hope it becomes obvious that I'm not really talking about the New York Times smear anymore. I mean, I am. That's but the subtext should be that Cenk and Anna, and Cenk, the fish rots from the head down, right? They have not retracted or apologized for smearing their own lie. So I was really glad that this New York Times story was in this, because Cenk, that's kind of why I kept all this campaign stuff in the video, is because, and Cenk has issues with the CNN article and the LA Times article, and this New York Times one was the most blatant one, which is why I start with Sam Seder saying the most egregious, right? So all of these reasons, all these smears that he was facing from the establishment media that shouldn't have been done, that seemed to have been avoidable, and they were legitimate, very much so. In fact, partly what I think might be why people aren't quite grasping the ethical dark web stuff, although some people might just think it's just fine, because I think it's kind of fun. To me, it just feels like sort of fun. Like I want some people that don't think too much to be like, it's just kind of fun. I just like it. But partly what sort of I'm hitting at with the ethical dark web thing and the New York Times smear, as you'll see in the next bits, is that they refer back to this a bunch. Cenk does, especially. I've heard him talk about it in his presidential media appearances in the last year, about how the New York Times smeared him. I think on the Briahna Joy Gray podcast, he actually, the one just recently, he brought it up, I believe. And yeah, I'm pretty sure he did.
One of the things that they did, Briahna, speaking of anti-Semitic, is I had invited David Duke on to see in 2015, why is Trump so popular and why are extremists like David Duke backing him so much? And he wound up going, I thought he was going to go out anti-Muslim, anti-Latino, anti-immigrant. No, he went purely anti-Semitic rant for about an hour straight. And I called him anti-Semitic, bigoted, racist, idiot, et cetera, because you know my style, right? And so the New York Times said that I agreed with David Duke. I had David Duke on, and I agreed that he was not racist. And people that watched the video, they were like, "What? No, guys, this is crazy. What? So are you guys trying to smear this guy on purpose? Because no one could watch that interview and think that I was supporting David Duke. So the New York Times, I know for a fact, is a bunch of liars, and they lie on purpose. So, or they're the world's worst journalists.
Maybe I'll do a video about that. So like this being smeared is a wound that deserves defense and correction, right? Like that's the whole premise of all these guys of the ethical dark web raising a stink about this and calling for a correction.
Apologize. Time for immediate retraction and apology now.
So I'm using this to contrast who's, and again, like let me finish that thought. To contrast like whose integrity gets defended. The cavalry showed up for Cenk in this case, right? They really did, and they should have. New York Times was completely in the wrong. It should destroy their credibility, as Kyle says.
Must retract and apologize. This is unacceptable.
He says, time for immediate retraction and apology.
Weird, you haven't said anything yet.
And she needs to be fired.
Are you kidding me? If I ever got something that wrong, I would immediately come out and be like...
But I expect the New York Times to have the utmost journalistic, integrity.
So is that a standard that TYT should be held to? I guess is a thing I could say in the video, but that's the subtext of this. It's like, why isn't TYT held to this standard? I hope so. Now that this video is going to get around, I hope it does. I don't know if it will. I assume at some point Kulinski's going to see this. I don't know how this will escape his attention forever. But like TYT should be held to the standard, at least this same standard that his cavalry wanted held, New York Times held to in terms of a smear regarding the way he smeared his workers. So we were these rubes that fell for a trick to start a union at his company.
We don't have computers.
Look, here's the thing.
All around, this situation is demoralizing and depressing.
On the bestiality front,
I love that he calls it a front. So like if I had played the part about the bestiality stuff, that wouldn't land as much. I just think it's hilarious that he calls it a front. It's like, so yeah, I don't know. I know I'm going on and on and on. So like the whole idea here is that this is a basic correction that hasn't been done. Checkbox. Here comes the mouse pointer. That's why I decided to end this first 45 minutes, 46 minutes here, because this is kind of the whole meat of the video is like, hey, you guys should retract and apologize. TYT should retract and apologize for what they did. And in my press announcement, though, I have the statement that I'm not calling on Cenk to apologize because I don't think he's of the character to do so sincerely, and I believe that, but he should still apologize. I don't know what a sincere apology would appear to be, but the fact that it's taken 3 or 4 years, and if the only thing that gets him to actually apologize is that one of the former workers he smeared made a documentary about it, it's hard to say that that's a legitimate apology, but he still should. So that's why I included retract and apologize in this. And then I just love this King Kong metaphor. It's like, that's where the part where I go, the plan was working. King Kong's on top of the Empire State Building with a woman. Every man's dream.
Plus, the audience turned up with open wallets.
1,650 contributions. And we have 240 volunteers, and it hasn't been an hour yet. What now?
The plan was working.
And then what? What's the plan from there? Where do you go? What are you going to do? Just move in? You know how expensive rent is at the top of the Empire State Building there, King Kong? Come on. So,
reeling from the day's bedlam,
and we tease.
Cenk seeks refuge in the harbor of a trusted friend.
We have
with my old boss, Jimmy Dore. So, that's where we start the next video. Yeah. I hope that made sense. Yeah. I hope it did. I'm thinking about the whole thing with not playing David Duke, not playing the video from there. And I think, I think I'm trying to, I'm not going to play it. Like, I don't think it belonged in this video because but I'm trying to choose my words carefully here because I feel like I sort of want the viewer to experience that story through the way it was interpreted. Right. And because as a worker, for me, even though I wasn't in the union because I got laid off, but I was part of the union, and I was really annoyed and found that incredibly insulting. I found it incredibly insulting that they were smearing me because I was part of this group when they came forward with this whole conspiracy plot bullshit. And it felt very destabilizing and very unfair that my story, my version wasn't going to be told or heard, that the truth was being successfully blurred. They didn't completely hide it. They got called out for union busting quite a bit, but no one's ever asked Cenk about it publicly that I can find. I think there's a power dynamic going on with the way shows want to maintain Cenk's favor, although I think that's probably dying or, fading and receding as things go along, because I don't think TYT is as relevant as it used to be in that sense. But I think that's still a factor. I refer to that in the video a little bit. And I don't necessarily think I'm going to get into it too deeply, because the point of all that ethical dark web stuff is not to call out those guys. I'd actually be more inclined to call them out now in 2024 after this thing gets hopefully more popularity and say, now that you know what's going on, you guys should at least do a video covering the truth so that you can help spread the correction. But I don't want the video to become like me calling them out for not covering TYT. The point that I'm making in that sense is that the power. Well, before I get to that, let me write that down. The point here. One thing I did notice though, because if I did want to make it more of a call out about the ethical dark web and other shows and stuff, is to show that other than Sahil, who said that shit about the Young Turks, about the employees, you know, the insulting stuff early on in the video, and where he air quoted union busting.
Thanks for laying out all this damage for your quest for, I don't know what, you're puffing up of whatever.
Well, it's clear he actually has some really great political instincts.
You actually have some really great political instincts.
Again, I could be wrong, so you know I will definitely update this if I'm incorrect. But I couldn't find any other of those people talking about the union busting.
All right, so it looks like we've got an update on the whole Cenk Uygur TYT union story. This is definitely one of the weirdest stories I've ever seen, just because it's really sort of, I don't know, hard to comprehend and understand.
And his was a anti-worker screed against the workers.
It's literally 15 effing people. I mean, this is insane. This is all for show. You're just going to bankrupt the company, which is like, why would you do that? All of this garbage to me just seems like a stupid exercise in futility. I don't know what the purpose of this is. This is why I think the left loses. They do this stupid stuff, and you're threatening their existence for an effing union of 15 people. Yes, I don't know. I don't know how TYT is going to be able to pay for that money, but why would you waste your time on this? You're dragging the name and the reputation of TYT in the mud for a ducking union of 15 people. And this is why the left loses. Unions are great in situations like Walmart or something like that, something serious. This is a clown show. Let's keep it real, dude. All this is just a clown show. It's all just an absolute clown show. This is a massive waste of time. This is why the left loses. A purity test of like, oh, you need to practice what you preach. I don't even know where this whole thing came from in the first place. It kind of sprung out of nowhere, you know? It kind of sprung out of nowhere. It's like, you're damaging the left. I don't think you realize it, but this is why the left loses. While you're wasting your time doing stuff to sort of puff up your wiener. I don't even know what to call it at this point, dude. This is so stupid. Those employees, those 15 employees, man, y'all suck, dude. I don't know what to tell you. You guys are terrible, man. I mean, thanks for laying out all this damage for your quest for, I don't know what, you're puffing up of whatever.
Well,
it's all a waste of time, exercise in futility. And anybody playing into this narrative is just doing damage to themselves. But a lot of these people are morons who just sit there kind of jerking off on Twitter, and they just do that type of stuff. But this is why the left loses. You just waste your time on like little stupid garbage like this when there's serious fights. And that's why the left loses, man. Y'all are stupid as hell.
While reading one of the articles, I had a bunch of really relevant information, which is kind of funny.
After a drive that included 2 separate complaints to the National Labor Relations Board, the company's rejection of card check in favor of a secret ballot, a typical business practice that Sanders and other progressives have fought against, allegations of a political conspiracy to sink Uygur's recent congressional campaign, and at least 2 1,500-word-plus screeds that Uygur emailed to staff arguing against employees forming a union, which were obtained by Politico. One NLRB complaint over the termination of a pro-union employee is still pending. Apparently, the emails go back to 2018.
So I guess it's calling him out a little bit for that. But the point I'm making about that is not that I'm calling them out. It's that those guys trusted someone who was intentionally deceiving them. They, not necessarily Rogan. I think Rogan is feeding off of a very different tributary stream of information, I would imagine. But those guys believed the guy they trusted, and that's fair. I think they deserve, I think that's what, there's nothing wrong with that. That's defendable. But they weren't being given accurate information. And the kind of overall thesis is that's on purpose. That's why calling this a mistake lets Cenk off the hook too easily. Because even if it was just a mistake, this is a monumental mistake in my opinion. But I'm saying the cover up and the not covering it is he doesn't want anybody asking the question, why did they start the union? Right? And I live the reason why. Among other reasons too. And I'm never going to fully explain every reason. It's not my story to tell, but I do have a story to tell there that is very relevant. And I don't know for total certainty, but I would bet, and I'd be very confident that TYT knows the story, knows the reasons, among the other reasons too. Although I think Cenk is oblivious in a lot of ways as well, so he might not have a full grasp of it. He's probably feeling upset that we weren't just, grateful for being allowed to be near him or something like that. But there was a huge and noticeable drop-off in coverage of Cenk's campaign when the union busting started. There might have been a mention or two of his loss, of the campaign not, of him not winning. But unless I'm wrong, I didn't see any coverage from any of those guys about the union busting. And it seems like that's something a progressive show would want to cover. But there's that thing where you might not want to upset Cenk or, that. And so, but the point of this whole project is not to call out David Doel and Mike Figueredo and Sam Seder and any of them for that. That's kind of what I get at in the beginning with like the COVID was taking over. There were those 4 articles, but nobody really had the actual idea, and news is kind of chaotic in general. So, and I wrote down the point that I was going to make, but now I don't. I think I might have said it, but I don't remember what it was anyway. But you've heard me say a bunch of the same shit over and over already anyway, so that's probably fine. I guess, okay, yeah, a little bit of a spoiler here. Not that, I don't even know if that concept is relevant to this, but the ethical dark web is the start of references to the New York Times smear. Cenk brings it up a bunch more. He fundraises off of it, meaning he brings it up at fundraisers. And it becomes this thing that shows the contrast between how he is wounded by the mainstream media smearing him, and he had a lot of backup people. The ethical dark web showed up and called for the correction, and here's the spoiler part, is they corrected it.
And then they put it up without double checking at all, let alone maybe sometimes actively on purpose doing it. So I can say that with confidence because the New York Times had to retract parts of their article about me because other journalists were shocked at the level of lying. And it's not exaggeration. They had to retract it. It's on the record.
New York Times issued a correction, and it was a shitty correction, which I'm going to get into some detail about too. But in that video where Anna's wearing the green shirt, where she and John are talking about, that's the one where she talks about her false docs accusation and stuff. I think it was later in the broadcast, but like New York Times corrected it before they stopped taping that day. So she comes back on, like I think they spliced it in, but she talks about the correction, and then John and her talk about how the correction is kind of crappy. They call Cenk a radio host, and so they were whatever. But like, so it wasn't a very good correction. And corrections don't actually go, they don't go as far and wide as the original reporting anyway. But the point is though that call for retraction and apology worked. It got a correction. Kyle Kulinski did a good thing there. Kyle Kulinski was appropriate to take that kind of action. And the only person calling for a correction from the Young Turks so far has been fucking me. And it's years gone by. And I've spent so much time and pained, cartilage that's no longer fully functional in my wrist. This wrist sometimes hurts when I use my hand. Years and years and years of someone who was slandered by Cenk, and that message was spread by Anna and spread by the company, and nobody except me has called for that fucking correction. And that's why I want people to kind of get a hold of this. This is the sort of stuff that I'm kind of hoping people do on the internet, is like go, well, yeah, there should be a correction. At least correct it, right? Correct the story. At least you don't even have to necessarily, Cenk doesn't even necessarily have to come out and say, here's why the union got started. And frankly, I would find that a bit obnoxious because I would fact check it. Let's just say it that way. It's not his story, but he could certainly gather information and tell his audience why this union got started, because I'm going to, and I'm hoping that they do come out with the story first. I'll give them the high ground on that one. If you guys want to tell it the way, make yourselves look nice, because I'm going to fact check it, right? Like, let's see what you got. It's coming out one way or another. You might as well get ahead of it. And I guess that's the whole point of the ethical dark web, is that and my hope is that it'll make more sense to people after they see the fuller context. So this is kind of the problem with this putting this out in big chunks, is like you're not getting the entire bite. And I've never made a thing like this before, so I'm inevitably going to fuck it up. Just to wrap up, I'm so fucking irritated that I had to do this. I really feel that more and more as time goes on, as the stress is building, as I spit pieces of my beard pieces. Who calls their own hair pieces? As I spit little hairs from my beard out my mouth, the ones that end up in my lips. Did I just creep everybody out? As I just like work on this thing, I'm just like, God damn it! I just didn't. This is not something I wanted to do. I felt very compelled that I had to, because they were never going to tell the truth, and it's wrong that they treated us with this level of disregard and disrespect. And just the union busting itself is an act of severe disrespect. Think how fucking disrespectful that is. I know it's better for you than you. I'm going to try to take away your rights, and I'm going to smear you publicly to the audience that you care about. And by the way, I'm going to withhold your raises and bonuses. I'm going to treat you like shit. And you're going to have to still come into work and make me look good. And after that, we're not going to let anybody who works here at the Home of Progressives tell the story. We're not going to do any reporting on my union busting, my NLRB cases. So, like something that they got, I guess, was probably unlucky, because most people aren't so stupid as me or reckless or whatever the fuck is up with my whole deal to do this, or has the wherewithal. Or the graphics ability. Honestly, that yellow is a little bright, and I think graphic designers could rightfully shred me apart for much of this stuff. I'm accidentally decent sometimes, or the bit, storytelling, right? But so unlucky for them, I'm involved, which means that this is being pushed forward. This certainly could have died off, and this just would have been another one of those things people list when they talk about the ways TYT has let them down. But I'm making sure that at least for those that find this, that there's going to be a whole bunch of information available. But also, so that's unlucky in a sense for them, but it's lucky because I truly value my integrity as a person of honesty and nuance. And I try to grapple with those things and try to be diplomatic and try to give them some grace and some good faith that they didn't give us. And in describing it as bad faith, I think they're one plausibly decent defense, if they ever have to try to mount one for all their behavior, is that, we didn't mean the workers. We meant IATSE. We meant Christy Smith. We meant Nancy Pelosi. We meant Cenk's foes. But that would speak exactly to why we needed to have a union, because we had zero agency in their eyes, if that's the case that they try to make. And I kind of think that's what, I don't think they set out to be like, aha, let's go insult them. Haha, let's get them. Although when you hire union busting attorneys, again, I don't know if TYT consulted with those union busting law firms. I just know that they used them for the NLRB case. And when you do that, when you formalize, and all these tactics, by the way, speak to, sorry, this is so small. Let's make it a little bit bigger here. All these tactics speak to a playbook, right? They're all boilerplate bullshit, conservative union busting talking points. These are all tried and true techniques for disrupting solidarity, to quote a great upcoming documentary. So the idea that they were just winging it, which means you're intentionally trying to this is the fucking rot within our world, not just Cenk, but within our fucking capitalist dominated world, is these people think they get to treat people like this, and no one ever is going to say anything about it. No one's ever going to call them out. So yeah, they got unlucky. They lost out because it's me involved. But because it's me involved, I'm going to break my soul trying to be fair and trying to be honest and reaching for those goals, which they didn't at all about us. They could have checked the story. They didn't check the story.